All right, we're almost there, guys. So hopefully in the next 20 minutes, I'd like to whet your appetite with some of our research plans at CNGL, and then invite you to join us for lunch. And over lunch, we'll have a showcase of some of the research that we've done to date, both through demos and posters. CNGL is at the moment in a little bit of a transition phase, tied to our funding from the Irish government. The Irish government funds the research that we do in 5-year cycles. So our first 5-year cycle on research for next generation localization is coming to an end at the end of November, and we spent a lot of time this year working on formulating a new research program and a proposal to the Irish government for a new 5-year research program, which is working towards the notion of global intelligent content. So what I'd like to do today is sort of introduce this proposed program of research to you towards global intelligent content, but also show you how some of the research and achievements and impact that we've had to date tie in with that and what we've been able to accomplish. How many of you would still agree that Ireland is a global leader in localization? People have actually been challenging me this recently because so many of the jobs around the traditional, so if you look back at the 25-year history of localization in Ireland, there used to be, I think, a lot more people employed because a lot of companies like Microsoft and Oracle and so on had a lot of in-house people, which has now been offshored and outsourced. But even as recently as 5 years ago, Ireland still was the world's largest exporter of software, which is unbelievable for such a small country of 4.5 million people, even compared to the likes of China and the US. And I'm glad that Shane Nolan had a chance to present yesterday, and that you had a chance to hear Shane present the Irish Development Authority's story and approach to supporting the localization industry in Ireland, particularly with the low tax regime and their approach to intellectual property, including the fact that they treat the localization of content, not just software, but content, digital content in general, as the generation of new intellectual property, which, when exported from Ireland, is tax-free. And a lot of multinational companies have taken advantage of that. In parallel with our leadership in localization, what's also been going on over the past 10 years here in Ireland is that the government realized that they really need to invest in science and technology, research and innovation in the universities, but crucially in terms of the universities working with industries. 10 years ago, the Irish government set up a new agency called Science Foundation Ireland, and the vision of SFI is that Ireland will be a global leader that places scientific and engineering research at the core of its society to power economic development and social progress. Now, over the past 10 years, SFI has already seen really significant gains in terms of Ireland's position in the global rankings for scientific endeavour and academic research. So they've invested significantly in this, 8.2 billion euros to date, as part of their strategy in investing in science and technology and innovation. And they've seen Ireland move up the various scorecards that they track, like getting into the top 10 on the EU scorecard for innovation, being ranked as the #1 most globalized Western economy by Ernst & Young, and crucially, getting into the top 20 in terms of scientific impact, particularly for the collaboration between academics and industry. So if you take those two trends, or those two pillars of Ireland's position with respect to the localization industry and the government's commitment towards investing in science and technology with a view towards academic and industry collaboration, that's where CNGL comes in. So what is CNGL? It's founded on a number of key pillars, really 2 key pillars, which are scientific excellence and impact, both economic and societal. So at the core of CNGL are the world-class academics in the Irish universities who are working in areas related to localization. So CNGL is actually drawn from academic professors and lecturers and so on across 4 different universities, which includes the Localisation Research Centre here at the University of Limerick, but also various research groups at Trinity College Dublin, Dublin City University and UCD University College Dublin. And together, built around a core of between 20 and 25 full-time world-class academics, the CNGL through Science Foundation Ireland is able to fund about 100 people conducting research in our universities that's targeted at this collaborative program, working very closely with industry around next generation localization for the past few years, and working towards global intelligent content for hopefully the next 5 years. And so it's built on the pillar of one, scientific excellence, and second, productive collaboration, both across the universities. And I think this is something we do well, is having different academics from different disciplines and different fields collaborating together on a shared goal, a shared vision for a research program, and also actively collaborating between the universities and various industry partners that we work with. And the outcomes in terms of the goals for this are both in terms of helping maintain Ireland's scientific reputation with the publishing we do in academic outlets and academic journals, but also demonstrating the impact of our research in terms of transfer to industry applications, either through licenses to existing companies, whether they be multinationals or Irish SMEs, or the formation of new companies spinning out from the universities to bring new technologies and new products to market. And we'll look at some examples of that. So, our vision for the next 5-year research program is enabling seamless interaction between people, content, and systems. And it struck me, if I think back to the presentations we saw yesterday from the likes of HP, Intel, Symantec, really a lot of the work can be characterized under this goal of enabling seamless interaction between people, whether they're your customers, your employees, or consumers in general, between people, content, and systems. And that's independent of the devices, of the languages, of the media, of content, and so on that people are interacting with. And we take this vision and we sort of break it down into 2 areas that sort of reflects the breadth of our work. The first of those is in terms of supporting global customers, and we see that need with the companies with which we work. And I'll show some examples of work that we're doing with companies in terms of supporting their global customers. But also, the second area is in terms of promoting multilingual society. You've just seen Reinhardt's work here at the LRC with the Rosetta Foundation and promoting multilingual society across the world. But this also applies to a lot of work that we do from European Commission-funded research, where the European community is absolutely committed to maintaining the multilingual society across Europe. And then there are other examples of collaborations we have with Indian academic institutions, where again India is committed to maintaining the multilingual society that they have there across the 22 different official languages. So that gives you sort of a background to CNGL and our vision for our program for the next 5 years. If we look at where this idea of intelligent content came from and sort of the challenges that we think people will be faced with or are faced with that we can help, I noticed that Dion yesterday in his summary slides of the working group on machine translation mentioned the different V's of content. So people today talk about content in terms of volume, velocity, and variety. And what I find really interesting is the velocity of content, because everybody knows the volume of digital content is becoming unmanageable, and the variety of content across multiple media, moving from text to speech as we get to mobile devices and video as we work with the YouTube generation. But what's really striking is also the velocity of content. So if you look at a 1-minute slice of content on various user-generated and social media, because it really is the trend of user-generated content that's driving this volume and velocity. And these are even a little bit older, some of these numbers. So for example, here it shows that 25 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute, every single. Did this die? No. I haven't noticed. Is that better? So here it's showing 25 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every minute. The number of tweets is on here, 98,000, probably 100,000 tweets every minute coming across the stream on Twitter. And I find myself wondering about the value of content. So the value of this, what is the value of this Twitter wall going on here at the moment? And I think it is quite valuable. It's valuable to people sitting here in the room. It's valuable to people who aren't here, who I know are following the conference, because you see retweets and people saying that they're following this tweet stream from the conference. But I get the impression that it's in the here and now. So how valuable is this tweet wall, this tweet stream right now versus how valuable is the tweet stream from yesterday's sessions. Because I find with Twitter, if the velocity of content and the volume of content, it's in the here and now, and if you've missed it today, what are the chances that you're going to go back to yesterday's stream to find out what's going on? So this leads to the situation where people, whether they're at home in your life, your consumers, or employees or enterprises in general, are data rich, all of this content washing over them, but knowledge poor. It's really about finding the right content for what I'm doing at a given point in time, in the right media for the device that I'm on, and increasingly also in the location that I'm at. And that really is the problem that we're looking at here, people being data rich and knowledge poor. And this led us to the notion of intelligent content. So this actually comes from the Rockley Group, which has done research on intelligent content and promoted this idea of content that is intelligent. And we've read some of the reports of the Rockley Group, and they've come up with a number of characteristics that they use to define intelligent content. And those characteristics include content that is structurally rich. And from the Rockley Group, they do a lot of work with content strategists at various large companies, and this is where things like data and markup come in, that you've got structurally rich content, but also content that is semantically aware. We hear a lot about people who like to see different content tagged with domain. If they're training different, for example in localization, different domain machine translation systems and want to route different content to different systems. And the goal being that this intelligent content, this content which is more richly annotated and more semantically aware, becomes easier to find, so it's more discoverable. It becomes reusable across different media, different languages, different devices, and so also becomes adaptable and reconfigurable to help its reuse across your consumers. Now, why would you want to go down this path of intelligent content? And I saw a lot of indications of this, again, in the presentations yesterday. There's a real focus on business intelligence and knowing what's going on in your business across your enterprise. Not just within your enterprise anymore, so it's not just about the analysis of structured or transactional content, but increasingly about what's going on with your customers. And not just with your customers in terms of their interactions with you, but also their interactions with each other, whether that's on social media or customer forums that we saw some presentations about yesterday. You need to gather that intelligence about what's going on around your business, your brand, and your customers. And you want to use that business intelligence to deliver more personalized experiences for your customers. And what that does is it drives customer satisfaction because they're getting that more personalized interaction with you, your company, your brand, and that customer loyalty. I noticed yesterday that Symantec was measuring net promoter scores as a measure of customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, and it's been shown that that increased customer satisfaction helps drive more profitability. So, the other thing that's going on, if we take those characteristics of intelligent content, the localization industry is used to being part of a content supply chain which is fairly linear. You're used to getting content created within the enterprise, localized by you, and then pushed out to consumers. And what we're seeing now is because of this growth in media, social media, user-generated content, the content value chain is more circular because it's no longer just about pushing information out to the consumers. It's going to be increasingly about also listening to what the consumers are saying about you, your company, your brand, your products, and engaging in that conversation. So we have to start thinking about the global content value chain as being circular and being this conversation back and forth. So for example, I think Dion will pick up on this later in the afternoon, the language services industry, the localization industry is about pushing content out, but how can we look at also using our skills, our knowledge, our technologies for having this two-way engagement back and forth globally across different languages between enterprises and customers. So what we've done in terms of our research agenda for the next 5 years at CNGL is aligned our academic expertise with these ideas around intelligent content and a global content supply value chain, and broken this out into a research program that covers the various aspects of this global content value chain. So I'll just run through each of them quickly, not giving you really the details of the academic research, but pointing to some examples of work that we've already done to sort of illustrate some of our thinking in each of these areas. All right, so the first segment in the wheel, these are all parts of the global content value chain, is around the generation and curation of content. And this relates back to this notion of intelligent content being structurally rich and semantically aware. So the academic research groups that work in this area for us would have backgrounds in language processing, language technology from the point of view of parsing, analytics, text analytics, multimedia analytics, to help annotate and enrich content in various flavors and forms for later processing, for whether it's adaptivity, personalization, translation, search, and so on and so forth. So as an example of this, one of the partners that we work with are the folks at Symantec Research in Dublin. So Dublin has become a research centre for Symantec over the past year, and Symantec Research Labs is one of the groups that we work with. One of the things we've been doing in terms of enriching content and annotating content is crawling both their internal enterprise content, whether it's their product literature or their internal knowledge bases, and annotating that and analyzing that using our linguistic analysis technology. And then also crawling the web for customer forums and social media that are discussing the same products and the same issues in terms of Symantec's products, and folding those into the annotations and the ontologies that we've been able to automatically build around Symantec's texts and products. And then the point of doing all of that is being able to use that richly annotated body of content that was gathered both from internal documentation and knowledge bases and external customer forums and social media, and then be able to repurpose and reuse that in customer interaction scenarios, and I'll show you some examples of that. But it's the enrichment and the annotation up front that enables that downstream processing. I've made a note there about crowdsourcing and forums and MVPs, but I'll come back to that because I have a slide later with some early sort of results of research that we're doing in that area. Search and discovery. This is related to intelligent content being more discoverable because it's more structurally enriched and contextually aware in terms of devices and location and domain and topic and so on. An example of this, again, is in customer care interactions. We want to be able to have customers who are looking for help, self-help through websites or through forums. One of the first problems that you often find as a consumer is you have a problem with a product. The first problem is you don't know how to describe your problem. You don't know necessarily as a product owner, as a consumer, what the company uses to describe the various features of their products or what might go wrong with it. So I may go to a forum or a customer help website and type in what I think is a good description of the problem I'm having, but that doesn't match at all how the company has used the terminology to describe it in their help documentation. So we're doing work on query expansion in search context for customer help to expand out what a customer might type in to match and help find content that exists to solve that problem. This has to be done cross-language, so that if somebody in Brazil types in Portuguese their problem and the answer exists in English or in a French forum, we're able to do that match and bring that content back. So translation is in there. And then personalization of how we deliver the solution or the content back to the consumer. Depending on the consumer's task, whether they're trying to learn about your product or solve a specific problem, you want to give them different information. Depending on whether they're a brand new novice user or an experienced user of your products, you might give them different information at a different level, and you want to assemble this on the fly. So we'll show a demo over lunch, and actually this is work that Ben Steichen did, who won the Best Thesis Award that was presented last night, across multiple languages. Just briefly, this is a request, or a solution to a request for information about the restoration or restore function in one of Symantec's products. And the answers that are being presented are not just a list of links, it's a navigation of information that's pulled both from Symantec's product manuals and also from customer forums where we know that this function is being discussed. So if we move on to translation and localization, which is really sort of at the heart of a lot of the work we've been doing for the past few years. Tony yesterday from Intel was talking about the dearth of training material for training machine translation for customer forums and chat applications. So some of the research that we're showing here today is how we can improve the quality of machine translation by using different sources of training material that combine the vocabulary, again, of Symantec Research's product from their internal documentation and multilingual content with forums from other companies that are multilingual, and then a lot of training on Symantec's target language forums that improves the final translation quality. And we'll demonstrate that in the showcase after lunch. Another area that we're going to demo and we're working in is in machine translation for patents. This is for patent professionals who have to search for prior art. And very often, it's now the case, the EU has reported that 60% of all new patents are coming from China, Japan, and Korea. So people who are looking for prior art and who are searching patent databases increasingly have to look to Asia to get full coverage. And if you find a Japanese patent, then you need to have it translated on the fly to see whether it is relevant to what you're searching for or not. What's interesting is that the work here is not actually in the machine translation, it's in the pre-processing of the text to annotate things like formula so that you don't put those into the machine translation system, references, claim numbers, lots of different numeric text that's in the text that you want to annotate and pre-process before it goes through MT. A couple of years ago, whenever the last World Cup was, 2-3 years ago, we were investigating how we would apply our machine translation to Twitter. And we heard yesterday about machine translation being used for Twitter. This was 12 different European language pairs during the World Cup. We trained up our MT to have all the stadium names, the players' names, and the different teams. And I guess now, when I look back, what's less interesting now about that is the machine translation, which at the time was the first. But we were also doing around that real-time sentiment analysis of the different people who were tweeting around in the different languages. So that you were seeing not just the tweet stream coming in your language, but we're seeing the sentiment. And that's something that's recently becoming more important with companies who want to track sentiment towards their brand, their product across social media in different languages. And finally, post-editing. So this is a movie which I won't show, but the little red dots, I'm not sure if you could see them. This is work we did with Alchemy software development under a Catalyst tool, where we're using eye-based, laser-based eye tracking to watch professional translators post-editing. And we're watching where their eyes are going on this. So this is work for Alchemy to help understand their Catalyst user interface when it was being used for post-editing machine translation. So we're tracking where the translators are looking on the UI on the screen. The size of the red dot tells you how long a translator is looking at a particular point on the screen, and then we can play back these videos that are recorded and do analysis of post-editing. So John Moran is here, who's done a lot of work also on instrumenting Omega T as a post-editing tool, and worked with Relocalize to record a lot of data on post-editing, to study post-editing productivity. I'm just conscious of time. So adaptivity and personalization. I think this is increasing when I talk about intelligent content. It's gaining all of that intelligence about the content and how richly annotating it for the purpose of personalizing the experience that people have in interacting with content. So to take a different example of how that might look, here's a language learning game that we deployed with schools here in Ireland. So this is for Irish school children who are learning German. And it's here it's the leaving cert, so it's the last 2 year of secondary school or high school. They're learning German, they're playing a game. So the game is that you're a spy, you're dropped into a hotel in Germany, and you need to get through the hotel and get out and gain certain information. The game is constructed so that the dialogue that you have as a character in the game is modeled on the curriculum that you need to learn for your final exam. So the dialogues that you're having are actually what you're supposed to be learning as a German student. The game is fully adaptive. What that means is that if I'm a good student, the game figures out that I'm doing a good job with the dialogues and makes them increasingly harder so that I'm challenged within the game and I'm learning what I need to be learning. If I'm not so good, it makes the dialogue easier. I'm still learning what I'm supposed to be learning, but the point is I'm supposed to forget that I'm in German, so it's at my level and I'm learning without realizing it because I'm playing the game. So we've got the adaptive dialogue difficulty, the engine in the back that's based on e-learning technology that's making sure that I'm learning when I'm supposed to be learning. And we're currently doing an Irish language version of this for kids that also has different dialects and speech synthesis, so you get to hear the different accents within the language. And then delivery and interaction. Professor Nick Campbell is here from Trinity College, Dublin. For those of you who have an Apple iPhone, you're used to speaking to Siri now. For those of you who may have a Galaxy S3, you're used to the camera being on when you're interacting with it, because it won't turn off if it knows that you're looking at the screen. If you put those two things together, the idea that we're going to be talking to devices that also have cameras on them, Nick is doing research on how you can improve spoken dialogue with devices while also recognizing facial features and body language. So this is a little Lego robot. And this was put in the Science Gallery in Dublin for a few months, and people interacted it, very simple speech. The point, though, was not the speech interaction, it was the recording and the instrumentation of the environment, so that Nick has all of the video recordings with focus on facial features. And this is now being used to help put emotion into speech synthesis, so you get more natural speech synthesis and spoken dialogue with a camera and a mobile device, for example, that you might be speaking to. And then, finally, analytics and optimization is at the core of what we do. You've seen David Phillips work on standards to help drive interoperability and optimization. You've seen the work here at UL around Solus as an interoperability platform, and Solus Match that you just saw. Some of the other work that we're doing in this area I mentioned earlier, which is around analytics. Yesterday in the Symantec presentation, you heard about how Symantec is working with power users to do crowdsourcing. So we're doing work again with Symantec Research. Now, I've taken the labels all off this. This is very early stage, but you've also heard about community managers. You've heard about community managers at Intel. You've heard about community managers at Symantec. I'm not sure when that job got created. That's a relatively new job, the job of community manager. It didn't exist 5 years ago, say. So what does a community manager do, and how does a community manager do their job with the goal of promoting engagement and activity within a community of customers? The little orange dots are individual people using Symantec's customer forums, and the big circles are cohorts of those users in terms of how they're behaving. So for example, the big circle on the bottom left is the novice, the lurker. Right, so they've joined the forum, they've visited the forum a few times, but they haven't contributed anything yet. The little circle in the middle are power users. Right, that's where you want people to be. They're the most valuable. And the other ones are the transition from somebody who joins your forum as a lurker and eventually becomes a power user. We're trying to understand what is that process, what are the steps along the way, what are the cohorts, and how can your community managers influence behavior to help more and more quickly get your people into the power user group where they are most valuable, while respecting the needs of the community and not upsetting the community's self-governance and so on. So, that was a quick, there's an hour and a half, I think it's an hour and a half over lunch where you can see posters, presentations, and demos of the research that we've done today. When I present a research overview of what we do, very often the question is, wow, that's great, but so what? How does that connect to companies? How do companies use this? And as I mentioned, we work very closely with companies along the way. I'm not going to go through the specifics of the engagement models, but I'll give you some. I mean, I think I will say one of the big advantages, this is set up to be an R&D multiplier. I've shown you multiple examples of case studies with Symantec Research. That's a very small group of people. That's not a lot of people, but they're tapping into the 100 people that are funded by the Irish government at CNGL who can do all of this research. And they help us by providing data. I mean, because we love to get industry data in that helps us have real case studies that we can test and prove our hypothesis for various things with real company data, and that is a real multiplier. The other thing that I think is important is that we've increasingly started mixing our academic researchers with a small team of agile software developers. We found that sometimes, and this is something we've just learned over the past couple of years, and Reinhard has pointed this too, the fact that he's now got software developers working on the Solus platform, because the academic research oftentimes still is a little bit too far back from where an industry partner can easily pick it up. And increasingly we're putting people who have design experience, product type experience, and software development type experience, so that what's coming out of the research labs is more easily explained and shown to industry partners who can then bring it in-house and demonstrate it to some of their internal customers. Talent acquisition is another big part of what we do, and that is one of our key goals from the Irish government. For the first 5-year program, we trained up 50 PhD students. So somewhere in the order of 50 students have come through our program over the last 4 years who are now graduating out with PhD qualifications. So Sergio is an example of one of our first who came through the program, got his PhD with research on machine translation, and is now working in applied language solutions. And knowledge transfer really is a key goal, to help transfer the knowledge out. That is one of our key performance indicators, the uptake of our research into the industry. So just finally, a couple of quick examples of that. Phil Ritchie is here. Phil will be at the showcase. Phil is CTO of VistaTech, who's been working with us since the beginning. We had an academic researcher in Trinity College Dublin who was studying stylistics, and he was applying his stylistic analysis to online plays of Shakespeare to see if he could figure out the different characters in Shakespeare's plays. Phil came in and was interested in the quality assurance process around localization, and eventually working together they figured out that, you know what, Carl's analysis of stylistics could be used for translation quality assurance, because very often you want to do QA not just on the accuracy of the translation, but also the style or the voice that a company wants to see pervasive across all of its content. So right now, VistaTech has formed a new sister company called Digital Linguistics. They're bringing Review Sentinel to market, which highlights in red the target language segments that are furthest away from the style and voice of the reference corpus, and those are the ones that the reviewers need to focus their attention on, which is so much better than just taking a random sample of translations and checking those for quality. Tony O'Dowd is here. So Tony was the CEO of Alchemy Software Development, and after they sold to translations.com, and Tony did his earn-out, came back to DCU and took some of our algorithms for machine translation, and Tony now has launched Cantan MT, which is a Moses-based machine translation on the cloud, on the Amazon cloud system, and it's just done some fundraising, this first round of venture capital. So that's a new company working with the university, and Tony's bringing that to market. And then finally, I showed you some of the stuff that we're doing around personalized customer care across different languages. We had a similar showcase here 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago at the University of Limerick, and Brian Kelly, who used to work at Langbridge for many years, attended the showcase and saw what we were demonstrating and said, there's definitely a market for that. So MSR is a new company that Brian is forming, taking some of the research out of Trinity College Dublin, and then MSR will be bringing this to market as a personalized customer solution offering. So that's a real whistle-stop tour. I hope I've whet your appetite for some of what we're doing. So what we've done now is, where you had the dinner last night on the far side of the bar, around by the entrance to the hotel, we've set up a buffet lunch where you can have a buffet lunch. And we've set up our demos and posters, and we have 20 to 30 of our researchers who are there to talk about what they're doing. You can interact with their demos, engage with them about their research, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Thank you very much.